open, look on, no hands, look on, no frame, no shame. Numb me up like cocaine, can't focus, shake again. Which moment makes a man? 'Cause I'm hoping it just begins.
Welcome. I'm Dr. Robert Groves, your host for the Groves Connection podcast. The Groves Connection brings you intimate conversations with pundits, providers, patients, leaders, and laypeople, all to help us understand a contradiction. How can our healthcare system be both magnificent and yet so deeply flawed? We're going inside healthcare to talk candidly with those who know. What they have to say may delight, surprise, frustrate, or at times even anger you. But I invite you to get curious and listen to the truth about healthcare and those who want to fix it. Maybe the answers have been there all along. We just need to make the connection. Are you ready to connect? Sherri Douville, welcome to the Groves Connection.
I'm so honored to be here. Thank you, Dr. Groves.
I'm fascinated to get into this discussion, and but as you know, I start way back. And so the first thing I'd like to ask is, go take it back to grade school. Where'd you grow up? What was life like then? What were you thinking? What kind of kid were you? Just start there and let's move out from there.
Yeah, thank you so much. So much can tie to my childhood. I'm very, very fortunate and had a lot of interesting experiences that have driven me, to healthcare technology. But I was actually adopted as a homeless orphan in South Korea to American, Caucasian American family. I'm here in the Bay Area, and my father was a senior manager at Hewlett Packard, for a long time. So, long way to go from being, a homeless orphan in Asia to be adopted, Valley, right?
Yeah, I did. What age were you when you found out that you were adopted, and what your background was? Do you remember?
Well, it's pretty obvious because I look like this, and my my parents were blonde and redheaded, so I always knew that I looked different. But that was very, very fortunate to be adopted. And it sounds like a dream come true, and in so many ways it is. But it wasn't without challenges, and we did have my mom. I grew up with her being disabled, and ton of experiences observing the healthcare system, and a lot of responsibility. Starting probably like 9, and then accelerating, through that. She had several surgeries to accompany something that she was born actually without a slip disc in her back, and something that proceeded to accelerate in its degradation as she entered even young middle age. So something that don't start to experience until their 80s or 90s is something that she started to experience in her 30s. So it was really just made a profound impression on me, and I always imprinted, just a passion for healthcare.
Yeah. So you come by it through family events, is so often the case. I hear that a lot, that a family member goes through something, or the individual themselves goes through something, and then they get the bug. How do we make it better? I want to help people too, that kind of thing. Is that sort of the experience?
Absolutely. And so I'm still trying to solve, the same problem I saw. Then we spent so much time waiting because different types of clinicians needed to work on our case and provide information before different kinds of decisions could be made, treatment decisions, surgical decision. And so just the agony of that as a family member was something that came flooding back to me when I encountered this opportunity as a way to really impact that.
Yeah. Did you have siblings at this time that were part of that as well?
Yeah, two older brothers were all adopted, so my parents weren't able to have kids. So interestingly, part of what made me who I am is that I have one brother who's adopted, from here domestically, and then 2 of us, from Asia. So I had the interesting experience of being part of a very, interracial family. And there's a lot that goes with that. Probably too much for this podcast, but
yeah, probably.
I was what would be considered a scholar athlete. So I took a lot of honors type classes and played a lot of sports. That was really the culture of the area that I grew up in. So did track, soccer, music and ended up rowing in college. But the thing that was interesting about me, because I always worked ever since I could, like starting at the age of 12, is that I never really had one click. So I did have some best friends that I still, some of them stay in touch with to this day.
Yeah.
But I was sort of a bridge to many clicks.
That's what it feels like when I look at your activity, and you're a connector. You know, you bring people together and create those bridges of opportunity. What a great place to be.
Yeah, thank you. I feel like there is a need for someone like me, you know, at this time in healthcare. So I'm very, you know, I'm very energized and inspired by that.
Yeah, yeah. So, were you a science kid? Was that something that was?
Yeah. I always loved science, and my dad used to bring home. So he was a finance guy, but they were a very heavy tech company, and he'd always bring home crystals from the engineers, you know, that they use in some of their, you know, devices and things. And he said, yes, now this engineer needed money for a project. So we had this collection of these crystals, you know, and calculators. And so we always had a lot of those kinds of gadgets.
Yes.
But yeah, my dad, I guess you could say he was super nerdy. And one of our pastimes was reading encyclopedias together. And so when I in school,
that's about as nerdy as it gets, I think, Sherri. But I know what that's. I mean, I understand that. That was always one of my favorite go-to places. And you know, just grab an encyclopedia and start anywhere. It's fascinating.
Yeah, exactly.
Stuff.
I think one of my defining moments is I really admired and was very fond of a chemistry teacher that I had in 5th grade, and she was amazing. She was very athletic. She swam every day. She was very tall, very striking, very confident woman. Ms. Monder took me by the shoulders and she said, you know, you're outstanding in science. And I said, okay.
Yeah.
And she said, well, I just want you to think about sticking with it. And it was interesting. I didn't think anything of it that day, but I do always sort of, you know, remember it because it was always continue to be part of my identity still to this day, you know, having a science background. Yeah.
All the conversations I've had, Sherri, mentors come up every time. There's always somebody along the way that was the guide star or you know, helping direct along the path, encouragement. You know, some sort of mentorship is always part of the story in one way or another. And it could be, you know, it could be parents, it could be teachers, it could be all of the above, but there's always something back there. I think it's good to recognize that, you know, whether you know it or not, you're serving as a mentor to somebody. Now, you may not even know who they are, but it's always good to remember that.
Robert, I am incredibly ambitious. So first, I'll say I have many, many mentors. I have a whole one for enterprise technology, one for boards, one for corporate finance, and lots of physicians. So many, many, many of them. But I'm incredibly ambitious. And my one of my overarching goals is 50 general managers by my 50th birthday. As one of my best friends said, well, you're way beyond that. And I said, yeah, I think I am, but it kept me very focused, you know, and it also buffers me from a lot of ups and downs that you can have in terms of leading a healthcare IT early stage company. You know, if you have kind of a North Star, it's very helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, one of the things that strikes me is if I picked up a dictionary and looked up the word overachiever, your picture would probably be there. You sound like you're the consummate overachiever, like it's never enough. You need that next level. Is there a drive there that is just intrinsic to you, or how did you develop that?
You know, it's interesting that, well, I think I mentioned that having my mother was disabled, and it was very honestly challenging, you know, for our family on multiple levels. Yeah. And so I think I learned very early that if I needed to do something, if I needed to buy a car, if I needed to solve a problem, like I was the type of person who could just call my parents to solve a problem because they kind of had enough problems to deal with. And I never really think of myself as an overachiever. I think of myself as a designer and like a reconstructor. And so the way that I think about the work, and I do a lot of things. I was just I'm part of a CEO working group where we get together and share challenges and help each other. And one of the things we were talking about, because we all converge on life sciences, healthcare, and technology, is that there's so many stakeholders involved. How do you build credibility and bridges with all these different constituents? Because you have physicians, and then you have investors. These are all different silos of different communities, and just that. So everything that I've been working on is it's not so much like overachieving to have, different stars, but it's more like I have a vision for how this problem. So the problem we're solving at Medigram is that a leading cause of preventable death is still delayed information.
Yeah.
But what that means to someone like my husband, who's a stroke neurologist, is that he just simply doesn't get the information that he needs when he needs it. And when you peel back the onion of the problem, what it amounts to is the fact that there's all these different disciplines that have to be solved. You have to solve the IT portion. You've got to solve the engineering piece of why most software doesn't work on his phone most of the time. And then you have to solve the technology integration, which is a people process as well as a technology problem. And when it comes to solving problems, you're really talking about communities. And so it's not so much trying to amass these gold stars, but it's just that you do have to have credibility in the different communities in order to be able to get people to work with you to solve problems. So that's kind of, because I don't have any advanced degrees. I don't know if you noticed that. I'm probably your only guest that doesn't have a lot of advanced degrees, because I'm very autodidactic, but it's all from a deep, problem solution mentality, I think.
So walk us through the decision-making process, because one of the things that my son has talked to me about is that higher education is less and less useful over time. I push back a little bit, because the college experience for me, it's where I made some of my best friends, and maybe as a social engagement tool, it was really important to me. Did you attend college then, or did you get a BS degree?
I went to Santa Clara University. It's an oldest higher ed institution in California. It's Jesuit, Catholic, and I believe in its method. It's about educating the whole person. So very centered on personal values, living them, our personal values, our confidence, conscientiousness, and compassion, and in addition to being very rigorous academically. And so I think another one of my mentors was actually, I had the chair of the physics department, and I was one of the few women at the time doing a hard STEM, BS degree, and he was great. He understood me really well. He encouraged me, but never discouraged me. But when I told them that I just didn't feel that I had the personality, and watching people like you and my husband and my friends that are physicians that really don't have your disposition to do what you do. I'm grateful to be doing what I do. I had decided not to pursue medicine. And when he and I sat down and talked about my education pathway, he really stretched me to the max, because I had the max load every quarter, and it was very both broad and very deep and very intense. So all the physics, all the organic chemistry, a lot of advanced math, and then things like psychology and sociology and economics. And he just knew that I'd be able to do something really important where you're applying STEM knowledge. He didn't know exactly what it was, but so I wouldn't be able to do anything I'm doing, without that foundation. And now one of the things I do is teach. I'm a professor of practice for board governance, and I co-founded the curriculum for AI and cybersecurity for corporate board members. And that I think that the idea of universities is evolving. And I like you do believe everybody that can afford to should, for the social and foundational intellectual experience. I do believe in college, but it doesn't have the same value proposition that it used to have, probably between you and your son, in terms of my perspective. So if you can afford it, definitely do it. If you can't afford it, I think there is a place for lots of different educational pathways. Like in our county, so I live in Northern California, Santa Clara County, I know a lot of the policymakers are really looking at junior college to help, because we need a lot of people in healthcare, not just doctors and nurses. So we need lots of different types of techs, both on the clinical side as well as on the IT side. And a lot of these folks can and should be able to be funneled through pathways that don't necessarily involve college if they can't afford college or if college isn't for them.
Yeah, yeah.
And I've had lots of different, faculty and senior administration at various universities ask me about interest in, joining this program or getting that PhD. And I'm like, look, there's really no advanced degree that matches what I think needs to be done in this market, but I'll help you build.
That's interesting. So unpack that for us a little bit. When you make that statement, there's no advanced degree that addresses what I want to do in this market. What is that? And help us understand what that means.
I believe technology can have a profound impact on healthcare. I'm not afraid of the challenge, but I respect the problem. I think the problem is much bigger and deeper than most people are willing to imagine. But I'm about facts. So I'm like, let's accept facts and then solve and tackle for facts. I have a hobby of terrorizing administration and faculty. And when I went to terrorize some of them, a couple of years ago, I wanted to know, when I looked at the engineering curriculum, I wanted to know why it was so narrow. Why? Because engineers, they can't really be useful unless they can apply that engineering knowledge and work in cross-functional teams with lots of other people to define and solve problems. And what I discovered was that engineering, and accreditation is very valuable. So not against accreditation, but the accreditation body that accredits engineering degrees dictates a narrow scope. And so the universities, if they want to have something that's marketable, which means it's accredited by their accreditation body for engineering, they're tied to what it is that it is dictated.
Wow.
That's something I'll tackle later in my career, but I feel, and I have a friend who just left as CEO of the accreditation body for business schools. But I really enjoyed, my friendship with her because I did her name's Karen Beck-Dudley, and she was actually the dean of the business school for a while at Santa Clara. But I enjoyed being able to interact with her in that position as a friend to help her see, as a hiring manager, what I need. Because what I need, I'm not assuming I'll be able to get based on somebody's degree. It's a multitude of character, values, aptitudes, and tendencies that really can accompany a degree. Does tell you things, but there aren't specific degrees for this field. So this field is intensely multidisciplinary, and I think you're well aware of that. So you've got to have literacy across the clinical domain, the technical domain, which there's many technical domains of, infrastructure, applications, cybersecurity, and then you have the project management. And so there's a lot of different domains, and our education is very siloed. And so we have to figure out how do we integrate people that have had very siloed educations and really put them in a system and make the system run and help them to be productive and develop in that system. I'm talking to some people about some advanced degrees. They can use our books because we have 2 books now. And so just like a little sidebar, we do have 100 of the top people in the industry that are from IT, informatics, cybersecurity, medicine, hospital administration, human capital, all working together on these thematic books. We've got mobile medicine, we have advanced health technology. They're both still bestsellers, in their third year of doing this, and specifically for medical informatics. And so those books, can be used to help, design what would be degrees of the future.
Yeah, what's interesting to me is the problem that you're describing in engineering accreditation and the singular focus on a narrow interpretation of that field is so similar to what we find in healthcare, right? I mean, your endocrinologist knows endocrinology very, very well. But if they can't work with the nephrologist and the cardiologist and so on and so forth, it's a reflection of the same kind of problem of disintegration, in the pursuit of managing complexity. In discussions with others, we've talked about how do you manage complexity, and there are a number of ways to manage it. One of them is differentiation, right? If it gets too complex so that you can't hold all of it in one bucket, you you cordon off endocrinology from general medicine so that you can become an expert in one narrow area. And then bringing those back together is the challenge. And how do you see that happening in academics, and how do you see that happening in healthcare?
So I'm an equal opportunity terrorizer. So I also terrorize medical education leadership in addition to engineering leadership. So the most actionable thing that I think would help your listener is along a few dimensions. First is that we do not live in isolation. The whole idea that no man is an island. And so one of the biggest challenges I think we've had in healthcare is that we really have two camps, of sort of technology personalities saying that they're working on transforming the system. And I don't know how much you've been following the OceanGate saga.
Hey, Connectors, this is Alden from the Editing Bay. I just wanted to clarify, depending on when you're watching this, OceanGate was an event in which the CEO of a company called OceanGate named Stockton Rush built an experimental submarine that was sort of denounced by all regulatory bodies, took several people down to take a tour of the Titanic in his submarine called Titan. The submarine failed and all of the people on board lost their lives. So that is what she is referring to. Let's get back to the show.
But as someone as a STEM person, I jumped all over it because it just resonated so much. And one of the things I also do is I'm co-chair of trust for the IEEE standard, which is a joint venture with Underwriter Labs, and it's about building trustworthy, safe, reliable technology for healthcare. And
so important.
The idea of OceanGate was that you could kind of move fast and break things. And what appeared to me, someone has experience with different engineering methods, that it looked very foolish, honestly. And I love the idea. So Mariana Trench is the deepest trench, off the Pacific coast in the whole, world. Yep. And then there's successive levels that are also daunting, one being the Titanic level. And then, you get successive levels near the surface of the ocean. So my idea about OceanGate, everybody knows from the recent news, was that it was not built to withstand the pressure. And so it's very analogous for us at Medigram, because web and stationary applications also do not stand up to mobility pressure in hospitals, which is why you'll notice none of your friends use much for mobile apps in the hospital. Even though they probably like to, because the ones they're given don't work for them. Yeah. And the reason why OceanGate was so interesting and compelling is because, again, people are trying to take, these move fast methods and bring them to a totally inappropriate use case. Now, I'm not saying that OceanGate shouldn't have been able to exist or do what they wanted to do, but I'm saying that they should have, so the equivalent of IEEE, but for the oceanic, market, had written them a letter saying, you didn't do what you're supposed to do in terms of these different tests and certifications. And so to me, they could have done what they did, but they should have been relegated to a lake.
And then we'd be talking about Lakegate instead, I guess.
Right, but the Lakegate instead of trying to take that to the Titanic level. And when I talk about, OceanGate, the contrast to OceanGate is the Deep Sea Challenger. So I'm a huge fan of James Cameron, who was the director, is still living, but directed the Titanic and several other movies. But he does take a very, thoughtful, intelligent approach to the way that he built the Deep Sea Challenger to do those expeditions for the Titanic. And when you look at it, OceanGate looks like a toy compared to the Deep Sea Challenger. And so the Deep Sea Challenger is not just a technical engineering, it's a systems engineering solution to a complex system problem. There is a lot that went into engineering that submersible as a system, other than just the hard technical engineering itself. Yeah. So what I'm looking to do is, you've got to understand that there's a lot of noisemakers that have an OceanGate mentality of moving fast and breaking things. They haven't done much in healthcare, as you know, besides create and issue lots of press releases. Yeah. And so with Medigram, and what we're working to do, we really needed to have all the people that have to work on the problem, come up with, the solution of the system.
Let's get into it. Let's get into Medigram. where you got the notion, how it was formed, and what you're trying to do in healthcare.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. So, so we're in the business of driving safety, efficiency, and profitability with data and AI informed virtual mobile clinical programs. And so I think if you talk to any of your friends who are practicing, in hospitals or clinics, they'll report that none of the mobile apps they have were designed for the unique challenges. And when you go into a hospital with your phone, I think, like one of my beloved colleagues, Matt Partridge, says that doctors are in airplane mode all the time.
Yeah.
And so there's a technical component of solving the technical problem. But the mission is also, it has to be more than a technical solution, and that it's about getting the right data to the right person at the right time. And at the same time, like, healthcare is under extraordinary attack from a cybersecurity standpoint.
Yeah.
And it's a critical national infrastructure industry. So that also has to be done securely, which also, that doesn't fit in with the whole Ocean Gate mentality, either.
Yeah.
Designing the system and the deployment and the implementation and the integration along with the actual technical solution is the reason why we put this consortium together, because there's a lot of things that a lot of people, important people, really respected people, agreed with our approach to the solution. But at the same time, as you know, probably as well as anybody, like, you have to have a buy-in basically from various stakeholders to be successful in this market, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
have you ever heard of organic, random, like, product market fit from outside of the industry, like erupting naturally in healthcare?
Yeah, well, fair point. Let me ask you, though, to back up a step for those of us that are a little slower, and describe exactly what Medigram is bringing to the market, that the parts that have been there before and the parts that haven't. What is Medigram doing specifically?
Yeah, so thank you for that. So if you think about like a medical grade WhatsApp, because, any of your friends who are physicians or even you'll have apps that have been designated to you I'm not sure if you're on medical staff for any of your local hospitals, but those don't work most of the time. I mean, and the reports that I get from a lot of physicians are about 70% of the time they don't work. And so
they go back to using their messaging app to snap pictures of interesting cases to share with their colleagues.
Exactly. And also they try to mask the patient information because they know it's, not legal or not
HIPAA compliant.
So
yeah.
My vision of healthcare is we get trustworthy, fast, safe teamwork, which we don't have right now, because people, physicians like are just waiting to get information from a colleague that they need. Like, if your family member lands in the ED and that ED doctor cannot make a determination themselves, they need to have inputs and feedback and test interpretations from colleagues. And so many of that time they're waiting, and it's maybe something's been sent that the system doesn't send it for maybe hours. Sometimes it's even been the next day, because the newer systems are not built for service, for guaranteed service or reliability or timeliness.
Yeah.
Because they're built to be free. So this leading cause of preventable death is really a worldwide challenge.
Yeah.
That's what we're looking to tackle.
Yeah. Very, very interesting. And who are your customers today? Are you out there in the market now delivering service?
Yeah, so we're ramping up to get into the market. We're on version 3. So we've had version 1, version 2, which were geared to smaller clinics.
Right.
We've published in peer-reviewed research in the Journal of Hospital Medicine.
Yeah.
And it had a high NPS. So there's 2 levels of managing it. There's the executive level,
Right.
where you should have a 360 visibility between you and your team and the team that you're working with. And then there is the specialist or the subject matter expert visibility. And so one of the things that I have to do is, because a lot of software developers aren't used to healthcare, but you still need their skills, is that I also have to shield them from some of the complexity. And so when you're talking about breaking things out, there's the device management issue. There is the software application itself, and then there's the deployment and integration, right, with the user and with the enterprise. So we have one of the preeminent organizational psychologists of our generation. Her name's Karen John Madsen. Yeah, so she's our head of talent, and so we have a skills and competency based approach to everything. And so there's basically two main levers for solving, I think, complexity, going back to answering a question around that. And first, it's diagnosing the situation correctly.
Yes.
Is this the Mariana Trench, or is this the Titanic level? And then if it is the Titanic level, what are all the skills and competencies that have to be in place? Now, we have had 49 cross-functional projects with 100 of the top people in the industry with these books, because the whole purpose of them is to drive shared mental models with leaders in the industry so that we could get, real work done. And so when we reverse engineered that, we reverse engineered it into 100 skills and competencies that you need to either drive or account for. No one's perfect, no one person's perfect, and no team is perfect, but you do need to have a good inventory and a good target around all these skills and competencies, or you're not going to be successful. And I think one of the things I'm grateful for is that we have, gotten a lot of wonderful opportunities and built a lot of relationships from the books, because the executives in the industry understand how hard they are, because they're highly regulated, these graduate level textbooks. Yeah. So skills and competencies. And then the other thing that I posted the other day was, what's your problem solving approach? And so one of the things that I was joking with Art, who's been chief medical officer for 2 health systems, that I said, one of the probably biggest problems in healthcare is that lean, as wonderful and important as it is, if you apply lean to chaos, you're just creating more noise. That doesn't solve anything. You can apply lean to known things like manufacturing, where the inputs and the outputs. But when you have multiple stakeholders and you have unknowns, you can't apply lean. You have to apply design thinking. So there's a spectrum of problem solving between known, repeatable, simple problems, starting with quality improvement, continuous improvement, and then lean, and then from the spectrum up from there, including agile, Kanban, Scrum, and then design thinking, from simplicity to chaos. So I think, honestly, the so many things we can solve in healthcare with exceptional management, diagnosing the problem and applying the skills, competencies, and methodology to that problem. That is what I think is will take us where we need to go.
When you say, you can't apply lean to chaos, I mean, one of the things that I'm reminded of is the story of Alan Morris at Intermountain Health. And this goes back to the 80s, actually. And there was a ARDS, which is a lung disease, an end-stage lung disease that leads to a pretty high mortality, adult respiratory distress syndrome. It's what a lot of people died of in COVID-19. Yeah. And the mortality was very, very high at the time. And in the 80s, there was an Italian study that came out that showed that if you applied this protocol that included placing severely impacted patients on essentially a heart-lung machine, they were able to show a dramatic reduction in mortality. Well, Alan Morris at Intermountain Health saw this, and he was smart enough to think back to first principles and say, compared to what?
Exactly.
And it was, quote, usual practice. Well, usual practice is chaos. They documented in their own facility that there's, 100, 200, 300% variation, not only between different doctors with the same information, but the same doctor on a different day. And so what they did is they began to standardize the ventilator protocol based on, collaborating with all the docs and saying, hey, can we agree on what you would do with this and this and this? And they went through this painstaking job of standardizing. And at the end of the project, they ultimately, it took a while to get adoption. And every time somebody deviated from it, they'd ask the question, is the doctor wrong and we need to educate them? Is the protocol wrong and the doctor is educating us? Or is this an exception? You're going to have those. The protocol's right. It should be applied. But the doctor was smart enough to accept this function here right now. And so with that process, they eventually got 80+% adoption. And what they found was simply by standardizing the approach, the mortality dropped exactly the same amount as using this expensive machine. that caught my attention. And it's what you're saying. Unless you have a baseline against which to compare, you can't improve.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's just that we're saying the same thing, and that it's like you have to understand what are you solving.
Yeah, and first principles is critically important there, and understanding that, yes, usual practice is not a thing. It is chaotic, and if you compare against that, you're never going to get anywhere, because anything you do almost will be better than that. The other thing that I'm thinking, Sherri, is I don't know if you've and this maybe is taking a little bit of a tangent, but I don't know if you are familiar with Ian McGilchrist and The Master and His Emissary, that book that's about the right versus left brain function and the evolution of societies. And as societies get more and more complex, they're more and more leaning towards left brain type functions, which is, fact-based, manipulate the world. This is how I manipulate my environment. And the right brain tends to be context, relationship, big picture of what's going on. Yeah. So the right brain should be the boss, and the left brain serves the boss. But we've gotten that upside down.
I totally agree.
And gone too far down. And that, to me, when you start talking about the differentiation and that results in fragmentation, we've lost our way. The big picture is what's important. And what I hear you saying is, I'm not only trying to be rigorous in the design and make sure I go back to first principles to make this work and work safely and work reliably, but I'm also cognizant of the psychological environment in which it needs to be deployed and the big picture of what I'm trying to do in healthcare. Is that a fair description of what you're trying to accomplish?
It's a very generous description, but it resonates deeply. And I remember you talking about that at the great talk that you gave at AINet.
Oh, well, thank you.
And I remember thinking, I wish I could have a snapshot of everybody's face, because based on their reaction, then I'll know if I want to be friends with them and work with them or not.
It's a test, right?
Yeah, just so wonderful. But I totally agree with that. And I just want to encourage everybody that and including you, to continue on this path, this human-centered path. You're not alone. The Brits are very very big on that, and it drives a lot of what they do in terms of policy and public health. Yep. And I feel that we have an opportunity, especially with the conversation around generative AI, to really assert a human-centered agenda, especially in medicine.
Yeah.
And that needs to be asserted, because what you're talking about, this left brain dominance, I know personally, I grew up in Silicon Valley, and I know people that I believe have it backwards. Yeah. And they're not, if they were based in facts, that would be great. But they're actually, a lot of it is hype and vibes, which doesn't work in medicine, because medicine is still highly governed by medical ethics. And so what we're working to do at Medigram, besides establishing and asserting our philosophy, is also really build this consortium around, highly trusted, respected players who believe in truth and that want to use that truth to help improve human life, to save human life and make human lives better. And that is a significant departure from the majority of the tech industry, to be honest.
Yeah.
So that I try to encourage people, listeners, our friends, to own that identity and to work together. We, I think, have a chance to make that really, more of a governance philosophy in healthcare, because that's the only thing that's going to work. If you just look, again, first principles, patient literacy is only 12% in the only peer-reviewed paper that reports on that. And so the whole dream that this left brain dream that people have, that patients will be democratized and be able to do their own healthcare, that is a pipe.
Yeah.
Not with where patients are right now. I'm not saying it's not a worthwhile goal sometime in some decades, but today they still rely on physicians and trust the physicians. So you cannot disempower and disintermediate and disenfranchise a physician when your patients are only 12% literate. It just makes zero. That's a mismatch. Again, it's OceanGate trying to go to the Mariana Trench when OceanGate should be in the lake. Yeah, if OceanGate wants to be in the lake and help people manage their allergies and things so that they can do that are simple on their own, that's fine. And so that's what our people that we know need to do. We need to work on classifying when people with their 12% literacy can do things themselves, but then everything else we need to help physicians systematized so that they can play their role as the trusted advisor. And we need to protect that. That's a very, I think, sacred position and relationship between them and the patient needs to be protected.
Yeah, and I think we need to reinfuse that even more into medical education, because it's not unusual now, and I know from personal experience, if you're having some kind of procedure, that you might be in the hospital for 2-3 days, never meet the person that's actually going to be doing the procedure. And that to me is not a good way to develop trust. Human beings have to spend time together in order to develop trust, and the technology should be serving that relationship, not the other way around.
Exactly. But we can't just have this idea. We have to do something about it, right? We have to work together in these working groups. We have to write about it and we have to act on it.
Sherri, you say that you're the CEO of Medigram, and I believe you, but you're talking about something much larger when you add in your philosophy around how technology should be used, and the publications that you're offering to forward your philosophy on how technology should be developed, used, deployed. It's a much bigger thing that you're taking on here than Medigram, isn't it?
Well, I see Medigram as a small early stage entity right now, but that's not what it's meant to be. It's meant to become a much larger, formidable organization. When that time and a lot of that has to do with hardening and scaling the practices that I'm talking about here. And so I do believe. So this is the thing too, is that there is something as a medical grade software company. I don't think it's truly been invented yet. I think it's something we're working to find.
I like that. Yeah.
It's very hard to do with, I was talking to somebody, part of a large physician group, and they've disbanded all of their sort of tech relationships because there's just too much misalignment between them and the technology industry. And so a lot of us, that I work on standards with, we just believe that the things that can and should be done with technology to scale it and to make it more efficient, to make it more convenient, are need to be done. Those are worthwhile goals. But people are thinking about it backwards, because when you get into a patient's home, for example, they have much less security, much less infrastructure, a lot less people. And so you actually can't have consumer grade technology in that environment. You actually have to have a higher grade of technology in that environment. And that doesn't go well with propaganda, but that's just the facts, right? And so I do believe that someday, not just Medigram, but also other friends that we have that we align with, will be building what are considered these medical grade technology companies. And it'll be something that's a well understood concept. That's what I think will happen.
Sherri, you have been extremely generous with your time. I do have one more question for you, though, that I'd love to hear your thoughts on. And that is, if there were one thing today that we could do to improve the chances that we get to a healthcare system that truly is equitable for all, what would that be?
So, I think all the work that we've done, that in terms of providing a resource, to the industry, to leaders, to standards, to certifications, to policymakers, is that the invitation for your audience that I'd like to make is that if they self-identify as being passionate about a truthful, practical way of moving healthcare, IT, technology forward, that just a shameless plug for both mobile medicine and advanced health technology, because that's what they were built for. They were built for people who are truly have an interest in understanding at a detailed level what needs to be done to drive the field forward. And they're available on Routledge, Taylor, Francis, Amazon, everywhere fine books are sold. And then also, I love to have people not just agree with me, but also debate with me. And so I do post on LinkedIn daily and Twitter a lot. And so people want to see what I'm saying, which I say something most days. I've got a bell. There's a bell on the banner of my profile, and I extensively discuss everything that we've talked about on a regular basis. Because again, this industry is a multi-stakeholder industry, and so we need to be having a conversation like we are right now as well as, in the conference environment, but also online. That's just the nature of the world we live in. So that would be my ask and offer to the audience.
Absolutely appreciate that, Sherri. I got to tell you, you are doing some wonderful stuff. You are by nature a connector. It comes across big time in all of my interactions that I've had with you. And I really appreciate you. And I'm glad there's people like you in healthcare. And with that, I want to thank you so much for being on the show and say so long.
Well, it's been an honor. Thank you for having me.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.
You've been listening to The Groves Connection, your connection to the inside story on healthcare, featuring in-depth interviews with those who know. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and anywhere else you get your podcasts. If you like what you hear, give us a 5-star review to keep the connection going, and hit the subscribe button to be sure you never miss a beat. The Groves Connection is produced by Dr. Robert Groves. Original music, editing, and creative direction provided by Alden Groves. Production support, content guidance, courtesy of Janae Sharp and Elizabeth Barrett. Thank you for listening. The professional ideas and opinions expressed in this podcast are mine and do not reflect those of any current or past employers. Thank you so much for listening, and we hope you'll join us next time on The Groves Connection.